Krell 9 was the kind of space no one talked about. It still appeared on star charts, still had coordinates and classifications, but in practice, it was ignored. No trade routes passed through it. No patrols scanned it. No rescue crews responded to anything that came from it. In galactic terms, Krell 9 was already dead. That was why the signal made no sense. On board the human patrol ship Silent Horizon, a weak distress ping flickered across the sensors, so faint it almost vanished between scans. Probably debris, the navigator said casually. Radiation echo. Happens out here. The captain didn't respond. He stared at the display longer than protocol required. Run it again, he said. The navigator frowned, but complied. Full spectrum scan. Deeper analysis. The result came back slowly, reluctantly. The signal wasn't debris. It was old. 9 days old. The bridge fell silent. Everyone on that ship knew the same fact. Nothing survived more than 3 days in Krell 9. 9 days meant one of two things. Either the data was wrong, or something impossible was happening. Confirm life signs, the captain said. The computer paused, recalculating. Then, life signs detected. Count 1. No one spoke. They didn't cheer. They didn't smile. Because whatever was alive out there shouldn't have been. The escape pod was barely holding together. Scorch hull plates. Cracked seals. Emergency thrusters long dead. It drifted without direction, like the last thought of a forgotten disaster. When a human rescue officer forced the hatch open, frozen vapor spilled out into space, thin, pale, and silent. Inside the pod, a child, not human, small, underfed, wrapped in torn emergency fabric that had stopped being warm days ago. Her chest still rose and fell, shallow but steady. Against all logic, she was alive. Her eyes fluttered open just enough to register movement. The translation system hesitated as her lips moved. At first, the sound barely registered as speech. Then a single word formed. Safe. It wasn't a question the way fear asks questions. It was a hope, fragile, exhausted, and barely holding on. The rescue officer froze. Then, without waiting for permission, without checking protocol, he removed his helmet. No automat, no weapons, just a face. The child saw him, and her breathing slowed. For the first time in 9 days, she stopped shaking. On the bridge, the captain watched the feed in silence. Bring her aboard, he said quietly. No jurisdiction check. No council authorization. No legal review. Because some decisions aren't made by law. They're made by conscience. And no one on that ship yet understood that this single rescue, this one impossible signal, was about to change how the entire galaxy saw humanity. The medical bay of the Silent Horizon was unnaturally quiet. Machines whispered instead of beeped, their lights dimmed to avoid overstimulation. Thin streams of data scrolled across transparent displays. Heart rate, neural activity, metabolic collapse barely being held at bay. She shouldn't be alive, one of the doctors said softly. The statement wasn't disbelief. It was professional honesty. Her species, the Averin, were known across the galaxy for intellect and diplomacy, not endurance. Their young were raised in controlled environments, protected from stress, hunger, and exposure. This child had survived vacuum drift, radiation bleed, dehydration, and fear. For 9 days. And yet, another medic replied, adjusting a stabilizer field, she's still fighting. The child's fingers twitched, even in unconsciousness, curling and uncurling as if afraid that letting go, even for a moment, would be the end. On the command deck, a priority transmission arrived late. Very late. The Galactic Council emblem filled the main display, cold and symmetrical. Galactic Directive, Level Omega. Human vessel Silent Horizon is ordered to transfer the recovered survivor to the nearest coalition authority immediately. Human jurisdiction is hereby terminated. No one spoke. The captain read the message once. Then again, slowly, deliberately, he closed a file, deleted it. An officer shifted uncomfortably. Sir, that order was absolute. The captain nodded. I know. This could be classified as interference. Maybe worse. The captain didn't raise his voice, didn't argue. He simply said, returning her to the same system that abandoned her would be negligence. Silence followed. Not defiance. Agreement. We escort her home ourselves, the captain continued. No handoffs. No intermediaries. The officer hesitated. And if the council objects? The captain looked back at the stars. Then they can explain why a child was left to die in forgotten space. That decision would later be dissected in hearings and reports. But at the time, it was made quietly, without ceremony, without witnesses, and without regret. The child woke hours later. Not suddenly, not in panic, just awareness returning piece by piece. She expected restraints. There were none. She expected shouting, alarms, something sharp and frightening. Instead, soft light, controlled gravity, and a warmth she didn't remember earning. She tried to move. Gentle hands stopped her. It's okay, a human voice said calmly. You're safe. The translator worked quickly. Safe. The word meant something here. Her eyes drifted around the room. No calles. No weapons pointed at her. No symbols of authority. Just people working. Where am I? She asked. On a human ship, the medic replied. Her body stiffened. Humans. She had heard stories. Unpredictable. Emotion-driven. Dangerous. But these humans moved carefully, spoke softly, and treated her like she might break. Why? She asked weakly. The medic paused, then answered honestly. Because you were alive. That answer confused her more than anything else. From the observation deck, the captain watched stars stretch as the ship adjusted course. They were heading into Avern space now. No escort, no advance notice. Just a human ship carrying a survivor everyone else had written off. Behind them, council monitors began to light up. Flags, warnings, questions. Ahead of them, consequences. And for the first time, the galaxy was about to test whether humans would obey orders or follow something far more dangerous. Their conscience. The silent horizon glided silently through the void, its hull rattling only slightly from the distant debris fields that littered the ashfall corridor. Every sensor on board was active, mapping invisible hazards, scanning for ships, reading faint radiation signatures. But none of that mattered as much as what lay ahead. The political storm that had begun in silence, now building to a roar. The Avern Council, or more accurately, the faction that called themselves the Northern Dominion, had already noticed. Reports had trickled in. A human vessel in their space, a child survivor aboard. No authorization, no escort, no explanation. And in the corridors of power, whispers spread faster than light. Who was this human? How could one human override centuries of protocol? And why had the child survived when our fleets failed? In the command center, the captains studied the Avern star maps. Every jump point had been marked, every patrol route logged. Yet despite all their knowledge, they could not guarantee safety. Somewhere out there, somewhere hiding in shadow, a fleet might be waiting, or worse, ambush drones left behind by the hostile Hollow Raiders. He tightened his grip on the console. We're not going to be subtle, he muttered. The officer beside him blinked. What do you mean? Subtle is dead out here, the captain said. This child is a beacon. Everyone who knows about her will want to interfere. We need speed, efficiency, and discretion. The child, whose name was Ray, sat quietly in her corner of the cargo hold, watching the stars streak past the viewport. Her 4 eyes, wide and alert, reflected not the lights of distant suns but the tension in the ship. She had begun to learn the rhythm of human behavior. Calm voices, measured movements, deliberate breathing. She mimicked them in small ways, wrapping her tail around her body when she felt nervous, but never hiding completely. The captain noticed her from the bridge, feeling the weight of responsibility pressed down like a star collapsing under its own mass. This isn't just about surviving, he said quietly to the navigator. It's about getting her home alive and keeping the galaxy from burning while we do it. No one aboard spoke of what came next. Not aloud, but sensors lit up like fireworks, a shadow fleet, barely detectable, moving fast along parallel trajectories. The Hollow Raiders had not forgotten. They had been tracking the child, waiting for an opening, watching the human intervene. The bridge erupted in controlled chaos. Distance, 50,000 kilometers. Closing fast. Signatures indicate 3 hostile corvettes. Weapons hot. Evasive maneuvers, the officer asked. The captain shook his head. No, he said. We'll let them come. They'll learn what humans mean by patience. As the raiders closed, Ray stiffened. Her tail flicked, ears flat. She had learned something in the hours of quiet aboard the ship. Humans never wasted movement. Every gesture had purpose. Every decision had intent. When the first volley of energy cannons struck the space around the silent horizon, the ship didn't scream or shudder. It danced. Shields flared, engines pulsed, and the human crew moved like they had rehearsed 1,000 times in silence. The raiders' weapons missed, overshot, and the smallest corvette spun out of control, its systems fried by a well-timed energy pulse from the ship's modified arrays. The remaining 2 hesitated. You're fast. One mechanical voice grated across the comms, distorted and angry. You're reckless, another added. The captain didn't respond. He didn't need to. Ray, sitting quietly, noticed a detail no one else would. The human at the controls didn't flinch. He didn't panic. He simply calculated, predicted, and executed. And when the danger passed, he didn't celebrate. He turned and checked on her. Safe, he said. And in that word, she understood everything. Behind the shadows, the council observers debated. One message had already reached the Northern Dominion. The child was alive, a human had intervened, and hollow raiders were being neutralized quietly. The implications were staggering. One human, one vessel, had achieved what an entire fleet had failed to do. The political calculus had changed in seconds. And for the first time, some began to question. Maybe humanity wasn't irrelevant. Maybe, just maybe, they were worthy. The night aboard the silent horizon stretched long. Sensors scanned, engines hummed, and Ray slept curled up in her blanket nest. But no one aboard the ship slept easy. Because out there, in the darkness, the galaxy was watching. And patience, human or otherwise, was about to be tested in ways no one could predict. The silent horizon drifted into the outskirts of Way Station Corin, a sprawling hub of trade and diplomacy where neutral species coexisted in uneasy harmony. Its patchwork spires and docking bays jutted into space like jagged teeth, a city held together more by agreements than by architecture. Ray stirred in her blanket nest, her 4 eyes wide as the station loomed closer. For hours she had stared silently, listening to the gentle hum of the ship, feeling the vibrations under her tail, and learning the rhythm of human patience. Now, she sensed tension. Something was waiting, something that might not welcome them. Captain Harlow guided the freighter slowly through the station's outer traffic lanes, weaving between merchant ships and maintenance drones. Every scanner on the station picked up the human vessel, but none of the automated systems could classify it. Too small, too unassuming, yet heavily armed enough to have neutralized hollow raiders without casualties. Docking was tense. Harlow kept one hand on the console and the other near Ray. She pressed herself against his leg, her tail wrapping tightly around his ankle, instinctively seeking the safety she had found in him. As the docking clamps engaged, a calm, yet commanding voice came over the comm system. Captain Harlow, docking authorization granted. Proceed to Dock 12. Sécurité liaison en route. Harlow exhaled slowly. They weren't greeted by fanfare, but that was fine. He preferred subtlety to spectacle. The airlock hissed open, revealing a tall, lean figure in neutral coalition uniform. Her eyes, sharp and assessing, swept over the freighter. Captain Harlow, she said, voice precise, I am Lieutenant Kira Salvin. You have a high-value passenger. Ray flinched, hiding further behind him, but Harlow knelt slightly, putting himself between her and the officer. She's fine, he said simply. She's coming with us voluntarily. Kira's eyes softened slightly at his protective stance, but she didn't comment. Instead, she led them through a maze of corridors to the Coalition's medical bay, a place designed to handle the most exotic and unusual patients. The medical chamber was vast, glowing with a soft cerulean light that seemed to seep into every corner. Advanced diagnostic drones hovered silently, scanning Ray without invasive contact. Ray didn't move. She had learned that sudden gestures often brought humans closer, but Harlow stayed near her side, letting her feel control of her own movements. Slowly, her small tail loosened around his arm. One of her eyes traced the drones as they worked, fascinated yet wary. A soft, mechanical voice greeted them. Patient is stable. Minor abrasions, mild dehydration, no systemic trauma detected. Nutritional support recommended. Harlow nodded. She's already had an improvised nutrient paste. We'll keep her hydrated and fed until proper meals can be arranged. The medical systems hummed approval. Ray, sensing the calm in the human, allowed herself to curl slightly in the blanket nest. For the first time in days, she felt safe. Meanwhile, in the observation gallery, the coalition delegates watched the freighter's arrival. Reports had already reached them. A human had rescued a royal heir, fought off raiders, and navigated the Ashfall corridor alone. Whispers filled the room. Impossible. Unbelievable. A single human. For centuries, the galaxy had underestimated humanity. Now, one human's actions had rewritten expectations. Hours passed as Ray acclimated to the station. Harlow maintained a quiet presence, speaking softly about mundane things. The layout of the station, the route they had taken, stories of distant planets. He didn't push her to speak, but he let her hear the steady rhythm of human voices. Slowly, she responded, tiny syllables and fragments of common spilling from her four lips like fragile wind chimes. Harlow listened patiently. Each word, each sound was a step toward trust. Each gesture of comfort reinforced a bond forged in the void of space, far from anyone else's rules or authority. But peace was fragile. Outside the station, hollow raiders lingered, watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. Harlow knew that the arrival at the Coalition outpost didn't mean safety. It only meant a new battlefield, one where diplomacy and caution would matter as much as firepower. He kept one eye on the viewport, one hand on Ray's blanket, and the rest of his attention on the hum of the ship and the faint pulse of tension in the station. And somewhere in the shadows, the galaxy began to take notice. The human who had defied expectation, saved the helpless, and changed the calculus of power with nothing but courage, patience, and a battered freighter. Ray finally whispered in Tezzeri, "This one protects me." Harlow smiled faintly, the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. "Yes," he said quietly. "Ido." And for now, that was enough. The silent horizon sat docked in the Coalition outpost under a soft blue glow, but outside, the Ashfall corridor remained dark and unforgiving. Hollow raiders still prowled the edges of sensor range, waiting, but the station's defensive arrays kept them at bay for now. Ray, now fed, rested, and cautiously exploring the station, stayed close to Harlow. She had learned to trust him utterly, her four eyes reflecting quiet determination rather than fear. Harlow, in turn, had learned patience beyond any human measure. Every small sound, every subtle gesture from the child was a signal. When to speak, when to remain still, when to move. Inside the station's council chamber, representatives of dozens of species had gathered. The news of a human saving the Tezzeri heir had spread like a wildfire through diplomatic channels. Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the delegates. Humans, asarati dalagata skufa. One freighter, one human. And yet, his voice faltered as the data feed from Way Station Corin displayed the silent horizon's journey, the rescue, and the confrontation with the Hollow Raiders. Osiris, supreme commander of the Tezzeri Northern Fleet, stood at the front. Her four eyes swept the assembly like twin searchlights, resting only briefly on Harlow's image, broadcast live from the station. I knelt before a human. Her voice resonated in translation. Not because of rank, not because of fleet, not because of fear, but because he kept my granddaughter alive. He faced death to shield a child. His courage and honor define his species. The room fell utterly silent. Delegates whispered among themselves, unable to dismiss the undeniable truth. Meanwhile, Harlow sat quietly in the observation deck, Ray leaning against his leg, her tail loosely coiled around his arm. He watched the massive Tezari warships arrive outside the station, filling the viewport like dark mountains carved of metal. Each vessel bristled with weapons and authority, yet the child did not flinch. She had survived worse, and she was safe because of him. A sudden alert blinked on the console. 3 Hollow Raiders had approached the station under stealth. Harlow's stomach tightened, but he did not panic. The Tezari fleet, now fully deployed and aware of the Hollow threat, moved with terrifying precision. Within moments, the Raiders were cornered and neutralized. Harlow allowed himself a small breath of relief. The station, the child, and countless lives were secure for the moment. The council reconvened, and Osiris addressed the room once more. Humanity has earned its place at the table, she declared. Not through conquest, not through threat, not through coercion, but through courage, honor, and unwavering protection of life. I recognize Captain Dan Harlow as shield-bearer of the Tezari Northern Fleet, and through him, I recognize humanity. Gasps and whispers erupted across the chamber. Delegates who had once dismissed humans now faced a species whose bravery had changed galactic perception overnight. Harlow, tired, bruised, and unassuming, did not rise to take applause. He simply glanced down at Ray, who had picked up a small datapad and was drawing her own crude sketch of the silent horizon. A smile tugged at his lips. The galaxy had shifted quietly, irreversibly, not through diplomacy alone, not through military might, but through one human's simple choice, to act when others would have walked away. Months passed. Harlow resumed his cargo runs through the Ashfall corridor, but nothing was ever the same. Wherever the silent horizon appeared, 2 Tezari escort ships maintained a respectful distance. Hollow Raiders avoided the corridor entirely. Word spread that the human in the battered freighter was untouchable, protected by 200 warships and a bond no law could break. Ray, growing faster than any human could have predicted, continued to call him Uncle Dan, her voice a mixture of Tezari syllables and newly learned common. Every visit, she brought him odd treats, hard purple cubes that tasted like burnt honey and coolant, but he ate them all, smiling with 4 eyes' worth of amusement in his heart. Even Osiris, the war-hardened Supreme Commander, maintained a formal correspondence. She asked about his cargo routes, his freighter's maintenance, and his health. She never spoke personally, but her respect was unmistakable. One quiet night aboard the Silent Horizon, Harlow dimmed the cockpit lights. Ray slept in her familiar blanket nest, tail curled around her body, her eyes slowly drifting beneath closed lids. The ship hummed softly, a lullaby of old metal and engines. Harlow looked at the stars ahead. The galaxy would continue to fight, to scheme, to maneuver. But for now, there was peace. And he had learned something profound. Sometimes, courage did not roar, it waited. Patiently, steadily, unflinchingly. The galaxy had noticed humanity, but more importantly, one human had noticed a frightened child. And in that choice, everything changed. Harlow leaned back in his seat. Ray murmured something in her sleep, and he answered softly, "Yes, I am here. Always." The silent horizon pushed forward into the dark, carrying its unremarkable cargo, and an unremarkable human whose choices had made the galaxy a little brighter.